Hello and welcome to episode 23 of the Crash and Ride podcast. I'm Patrick Ferguson. I'm your host. Today's guest is Tim Midyett. Tim was a member of the highly influential band Silkworm. He also was a member of the band Bottomless Pit, and now he has a new band called Mint Mile he's been in for about 5 years. Tim and I talked about the loss of his best friend Michael Dahlquist, who was drummer for Silkworm, and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're not familiar with the podcast, Crash and Ride is a long-form interview podcast where I talk to musicians who survived anxiety, depression, and addiction. The idea was that if we could have honest and open conversations about our sadness and our suffering, and we could honestly talk about what our lives are like, what happened, and how we're doing now, that I could create a dialogue where we could see ourselves and the sufferings of other musicians, and we could maybe find ways to help ourselves and help each other. I mean, I think it's clear that like most of us are on our own for mental health care as musicians. Like we either don't make enough money to qualify for one thing, or we make too much to qualify for another, and we live in one of these benighted sections of the country where healthcare is seen as some kind of luxury that we have to earn. So my hope is that through this show we can kind of, if not build a community, then at least come up with a language where we can speak to each other about how we're doing, and to not be afraid to say to the musicians closest to us, hey man, are you doing okay? This last week brought the incredibly tragic news of the suicide of David Berman from Silver Jews, and he was not somebody I knew closely, but he was close to a whole lot of people I care about, and a lot of people are hurting, and man, I don't even know what to say about that. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And Tim and I talk about it a little bit. Tim played in the Crush Brothers, and Dave Berman was part of that at some point, and they had sort of loose association. And yeah, I just don't even know what to say about it. It's broken my heart this week. A friend of mine who's out on the road, who's a huge fan of David's work, sent me these lyrics yesterday. Where nothing's wrong and no one's asking, but fear's so strong it leaves you gasping. No way to last out here like this for long. 'Cause everywhere I go, I know. Everywhere I go, I know. All my happiness is gone. That's lyrics from David Berman's new Purple Mountains record, and I guess he was telling us how he felt. Look, take care of yourself and be kind to yourself, and reach out for help if you need it. There's no one here to take care of us but us. With that in mind, if you're contemplating self-harm, if you're having dark thoughts and you don't know where to turn, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. It's 24/7. It's confidential. It's free. It's staffed by trained volunteers to talk to you and help you through your crisis. 1-800-273-8255. Also, if you're a trans person, you're experiencing anxiety and depression and dysphoria, and you need a peer to talk to, the Trans Lifeline's peer support line is 1-877-565-8860. That's 1-877-565-8860. I have a couple of other quick announcements. Way back last March, I think it was, episode 3 of this podcast came out, and I interviewed Phil Smith, who was my drum teacher and also does a great podcast called the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. If you're a drummer and you're not listening to that podcast, I don't know what you're doing, man. We talked about anxiety and physical manifestations of it through either back pain or wrist pain or shoulder pain or loss of use or inability to play. And it was a really good conversation. He's going to repost that episode on the Drummers Weekly Groovecast podcast this week. I think it comes out tonight, same time this podcast comes out. So Drummers Weekly Groovecast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, all the major podcast aggregators. It may even be on Spotify, I'm not sure. SoundCloud is their primary way of releasing it. You can go check it out there. I'd highly recommend it. Okay, also, Crash and Ride is brought to you in part by Greer Amplification. Greer Amps builds the best boutique effects pedals available. If you're looking for an overdrive, boost, fuzz, compressor, or tremolo that is rugged, road-tested, and at home on stage, in the studio, or in your living room, Greer has a pedal for you. Nick and his staff strive to build the best products around with the best tone you've ever heard. They believe in their products and they stand behind them too, backing each one up with a lifetime warranty to the original owner. Each Greer Amps product is hand-built in Athens, Georgia, USA. Go to www.greeramps.com or visit your favorite music retailer today. Crash and Ride is also brought to you in part by Jittery Joe's, a local coffee roaster in Athens, Georgia. They've created a special espresso blend called Crash and Ride, named after the podcast. It's going to be available on their web store, in our web store once that's built, which should be about a week away now. There's also going to be a live event where we debut that espresso at Hendershot's Coffee, a really great local coffee shop here in Athens. It's musician-owned and operated. I'll be talking to Bob Sleppy, the director of Nucci Space, which is a local nonprofit musicians resource center. They do referrals for mental health for musicians and also sometimes have physicians come in and do like dentistry or hearing tests. And Bob's the director of that organization. I'm really looking forward to talking to him. In other more cheerful news, I got some new microphones. You may have noticed an increase in audio quality here. I have a Heil PR40 that I bought. I bought a pair of them. My plan was to use them for my portable rig, and I thought, let me just try this out at home. And it has replaced the large diaphragm condenser I was using because in a shootout there was no contest. I used to use these PR40 mics in the studio for snare drum, and somebody was like, "Hey, those are really good broadcast mics." And when I stopped working in the studio I used to work in, I sold a bunch of my studio stuff, so I didn't have my PR40 anymore. But I picked up a pair, and man, I'm stoked. This is a really great sounding microphone. So I guess that's all the announcements I have. Let's jump into our interview with Tim Midyett. All right, I'm here with Tim Midyett, baritone guitar player for Bottomless Pit, bassist for Silkworm, member of the Crush Brothers. I'm looking at your discography. I've got it right in front of me, and I see.
Right on. My current band is called Mint Mile.
Oh, and Mint Mile, of course.
Right on.
Silkworm, 11 albums, 4 EPs, 9 singles.
Yikes.
Bottomless Pit, 3 albums, and then the Crush Brothers, 1 album. You've got a lot of work out there, Tim.
I know. It's all floating around. It's, it'll outlive me. It can't help but outlive me.
Right.
Because it's not, these aren't, it's not Apple Music. It's on records.
Right.
So it'll still be there.
Yeah. How long's Mint Mile been going?
Oh, gosh. Longer than it feels like it's been. We've got these 3 EPs out, and we just finished a double album.
Wow.
And I'm gonna say 5 years, but I don't really know for sure off the top of my head. I'm gonna say 5 years. So I'm gonna go with that.
The stuff I've heard with Mint Mile is a bit of a departure from the sort of Silkworm, Bottomless Pit, post-hardcore thing, and more of an Americana thing, right?
Yeah, it's sort of. I think it's more approachable and maybe more abstract at the same time. Like it's kind of there's a particular kind of feeling adult kind of feeling I wanted to get in the music that these guys are really good at getting. And I think that's a good shorthand way of describing it.
Yeah.
It's pretty rewarding, and it's a great band.
I mean, Americana is a dangerous label because there's a lot of hack stuff out there, sort of posing as Americana.
Yeah, and it's not a genre. I mean, we're all Americans and stuff, so
right.
But it's not a genre exercise. We're not like, okay, we're listen to this Graham Parsons song again and try to do it like that. I haven't listened to that stuff in a long time. So, but there's pedal steel and an Ampeg scroll bass like Rick Danko used to play in the band and stuff like that. Yeah. And Jeff, the drummer, is a real awesome sort of Al Jackson style drummer. So I think it's pretty soulful, good. I feel like I can say the band is great because I'm the worst musician in the band by a long shot. So.
That's exactly how you want to be. You want to own the worst house in a rich neighborhood, and you want to be
right.
the weakest player in a strong band.
Yeah, the weakest link in your own band. That's how it should be. And I've been fortunate enough to pull that off.
Yeah.
At every step,
So who are the other members of Mint Mile?
Jeff Panel was the first guy on board, and I saw Jeff play for the first time at a tribute, a memorial thing for Jason Molina. We both played at it, and I played with the Magnolia Electric Company guys, and Jeff was in Songs Ohio, the last version of Songs Ohio that Molina had before he just capriciously decided, as he did, to change his name and everybody in the band. So I saw Jeff play the drums, and Bottomless Pit was winding down at that point. I was like, man, that guy's an awesome drummer, you know.
Right.
I just loved the way he played, and I asked him if he wanted to play, blah, blah, blah. So, and then Andy Cohen, who is my partner in crime, and we, you know, played in Silkworm and Bottomless Pit together for eons.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up together. He played in the band, and then we added Matt Barnhart, my friend from Texas, on bass. He's a recording engineer and mastering engineer. Super good dude.
Always a solid plan to have at least one recording engineer in the band.
Yeah, he makes the records for cheap, you know, and
right,
exactly. Nothing. So I totally take advantage of him on that front. But and then Andy was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out because he had other stuff to do. He's a super busy dude. So Jeff was like, you should get my friend Justin to play with us, play pedal steel with us. And this guy comes in, and the first thing he did with us was a recording, like literally set it up. I'm like, let's record this bit that I need in this tune. And we cut it and it was done, you know, and I thought that was going to be good. And then he's just been smearing pedal steel over everything and playing his crazy guitar that he plays, you know, ever since. So, yeah, Andy's in Boston now, so he's not in the group anymore. And I won't see him as much, which is a drag. But the other guys are all awesome. And then we have other people who play on stuff when they're around, you know. My friend Howard Draper.
Yeah, you and Andy have been together since the beginning in Missoula, right?
Yeah, we met at Roosevelt Middle School in I don't know, in 1980 or something, and I knew Andy before he played the guitar, and I probably had just started to play bass. I was like 12 when I started to dork around with bass. So, yeah, we've known each other since, you know, literally childhood.
Then you guys' first band was Einheit?
Well, the first band we were in together, let's see. The first band we were in together was a band called Children of Habit. That is it's probably the best band name of anything I've ever been involved with. But we just played like Sunshine of Your Love and stuff like that. And we just played in Ben Kuster's basement, the guy who played drums in first version of Silkworm and in Einheit. So anyway, Children of Habit. And then we were in Einheit together. And Einheit was the first good band we were in. So then we played together in that band for a couple of years, and that's really where we cut our teeth on playing weird rock music that had a, you know, limited audience. Yeah, you know, you get used to that pretty quick when you're in, you know, Montana in the early 80s, and you have to scrape together a place to do shows and stuff, and so a different place every time and that kind of bag. So yeah, we were well primed for our 4 years of eating shit in Seattle by the time we were, you know, done with that.
Yeah, so you moved to Seattle. You worked as a taxi driver there.
Yeah, we all did. Andy did, and Michael, that's where we met Michael Dahlquist, our awesome drummer and great friend. And Michael was the first one to drive a cab, you know, but Joel never drove a cab. I don't think so. God, did he? Nah, no way. That wouldn't have worked out.
I saw Silkworm at South by Southwest with A Miniature and somebody else. I think it was Liberty Lunch in the mid-'90s, and then we played together with 5/8 and Silkworm played together in Tallahassee with that amazing band from Mississippi. Oh man, Sons.
August Sons.
That was
August Sons.
Yeah,
those guys were the weirdest, man. They were. Yeah, that band was crazy. Like,
I mean, it felt almost like a what's the guy from Louisville? My brain.
Well, you said Louisville. That's what it was like.
Yeah, it was very Louisville.
Like Louisville.
But it almost felt like a bit, like a Bonnie Prince Billy bit. You know, like if he had moved to Mississippi, he would have pulled this band together as a thing, and yet they were completely like they were organic, like the real honest to God weirdness. But I mean, there's a lot of like North Mississippi weirdness, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were genuinely addled guys. Like, they did not have any, there was no knowing quality to what they were doing. They were just doing it the way they'd always done it. And it was totally bizarre.
Yeah, it was great.
I like that band a lot. And they had this record, Plants, Planets, and Insects, that I still have around and play every now and then. I think it's really great. But yeah, I remember that show very well, which is saying a lot because I don't remember too many individual shows. But I remember you guys being great, and I remember those guys being great. I remember Mike singing that, inventing emo with that song Weirdo, and standing in the middle, standing on like a table in the middle of the room or whatever the fuck he did.
Yeah,
but it was a great show.
Mike used to always sing that song. This is Mike Mantione from 5'8". Used to always sing Weirdo. He would start the show with it usually, or sometimes we'd end with it, depending on the mood of the night. He would sing it off the PA and would kind of pull people in. But
smart.
Inventing emo. That's actually pretty funny. The documentary about 5'8" will be debuted at this year's South by Southwest, and it's called Weirdo. But
awesome.
It's in the sort of theme of documentaries of 90s bands that somehow missed being ground up and made into breakfast cereal, like so many 90s bands were. So at the time I saw Silkworm, it was you, Michael, Andy, and Joel. And then Joel left sometime later. I mean, this is all pretty well, I guess we're covering ground that's very well covered by the Couldn't You Wait documentary.
Yeah.
But when did you leave Seattle to go to Chicago?
Well, Andy was the first one who bailed because we kind of reached this point, when we got on Matador, me and Andy and Michael, and we made Firewater, which we've been through this with a few labels where basically every label the Worm was ever on, where the person at the label would be like, man, this new record, this is going to be the shit,
Right.
And then, it comes out and it's great, or whatever, but, the same people buy it, same 4,000 people or whatever. So that happened. Literally, it happened in the West, happened with Libertine, the two records we made with Joel, the two best albums we made with Joel. It happened, and it happened with Firewater, which was the first Matador record. At least Gerard was sold that it was going to be a thing, and it just did what it did. So anyway, we put out our second record on Matador. It was pretty clear to me, at least, that we were in the hole enough that we were never going to recoup. They were probably not going to have us on their roster anymore. So we were all kind of like, we should try to become better human beings and do something besides drive around the van and just, play in Des Moines and whatever. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go back and get my electrical engineering degree at University of Washington. Andy already had his philosophy degree from UW, and he decided he wanted to go to law school, and he got into U of C, and he moved. We actually moved him out here on a tour, and then we were out here a few years later. I want to say 2.5 years later.
Yeah,
I think we literally moved here and went to his law school graduation. So it must have been about 3 years after he moved here.
Man,
and Michael was here very shortly after that, I think.
Yeah,
pretty sure. So that would have been 2001-ish.
Right, and Michael goes to work at Shure, right?
Yeah, I was already working at Shure because that's what got me out here, and that was the job that I got out of school, and then Michael came out and he got a job as a technical writer at Shure, and he was out there too. Yeah.
And
yep.
Joel was out of the band by that point.
Yeah, Joel quit the band in '94.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's so, the time scale is so weird, right? Like, it doesn't feel like 7 years passed between, I mean, bands form, make records, break up in like 2 or 3 years. And,
right.
We have these like eons. We have these like, eras of the band. So, but yeah, he started Silkworm in '87, and then he quit in '94. And we've realized now that we probably should change the name after he left the band. But we felt like, it's our band too, so we didn't do it. But
are you still in touch with Joel?
Retrospect. Yeah, when I can be, he's he comes in and out of contact, and so I won't hear from him for months, and then sometimes I'll send him something, and I'll be like, I heard the version of A Forest by The Cure off of the concert album today. Of course, I thought of you or whatever,
right?
And because we worship that particular track, and maybe he'll write me and say, I love you, great to hear from you, or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those relationships you have that guys have a lot, right? Where it's like you don't talk to someone for 3 years, and then you see each other, and it's just like boom,
right.
It's all kind of back. Yeah.
So I want to back up a little bit to Missoula, because I know that you and Steve Albini and Andy, that you're growing up there, and I don't know what the scene was like. I mean, you said like there was no real indie rock scene, but like what
right.
was what did your folks do? What was your childhood like?
Well, my childhood was I was born, just going all the way back to the beginning. Yeah. I was born in in this town Haber, Montana, which is on the High Line way up north. Like not like you could walk to Canada from Haber. It would take a while, but you could do it. In a day or whatever.
Right. When you say High Line, is that like a geographical term? Is that a term? Like
it's a term referring to the part of, I think it's just Montana. Maybe there's this Highway 2, that goes from the West Coast all the way out like to here, basically, and maybe it goes all the way across the country. But in Montana, at least, that's called the High Line, and it also corresponds loosely to, well, not so loosely, pretty much exactly to where the railroad went through. And, obviously railroads are not used as much now as they were a while ago. So a lot of these towns are kind of withering, places, and have been for a long time. And Haver is one of those places. They have a college there, so that keeps the town kind of semi-vibrant, and alive. But anyway, I was born up there.
Those railroads were moving copper to the West Coast then.
Yeah, it was, and it was the one way to get stuff from one side of the country to the other. And yeah. So, it's a real weird. I could talk about Haver for a while, but there's probably no point. Anyway, I was born there, and then we bounced around. My dad was kind of a searcher trying to find jobs he liked, with his in like state government, local government, stuff like that. And so we went to Richland, Washington, which is a pretty terrible place. It's right by the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which is I think it's still the largest repository of nuclear waste in the United States.
If it's not Yucca Mountain, it's Hanford.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend going there, but we lived there for a bit, and we went to Big Fork, Montana, and lived out in the woods, and we went to Helena, Montana, and we lived out on a farm, and then we finally, I think I was in third grade when we moved to Missoula, and then that's really my hometown. That's where I grew up,
Yeah.
But we bounced around a bit.
Was there a lot of economic insecurity as a result of all that sort of nomadic life?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. We were poor, genuinely poor.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because, I knew we didn't have any money, I guess, but, you talk to people who grew up poor, and a lot of them will say, I didn't really feel like we were poor until X happened or whatever. They had some moment of reckoning where they realized it. And that's kind of the way things were for us. Like, my dad bounced around a lot, and, we never had any dough, but my parents were college educated, and we had books and went to school, and there was no, I always knew they loved me and stuff. So that's like, you realize as you grow up, that was like 90% of it.
Sure.
If your parents love you unconditionally and don't abuse you and stuff, then you can put up with a lot. And we did put up with a lot. We didn't have money. Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a difference between poverty and squalor.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely wasn't anything approaching squalor.
Yeah. There's a lot of wealthy people I know who live in abject squalor,
Yeah. Right. At least until someone comes and picks up after them.
Right. So.
Yeah, we had no dough. And we bounced around a lot. And when we landed in Missoula, it was nice to have that stability. And I think I've carried that with me. Like, I don't like moving. And, we lived in Seattle for 11 years, and I lived in really mostly in two places that whole time. And then, out here we've had two different places that we've lived in the last 18 years, and that's kind of my bag.
So you quit drinking early. Like, I know that you, like me, were abstinent through a lot of the 90s. Was that a family thing, or?
Yeah. I have it in my family, on my dad's side, and so I got to live through. I had a great education, honestly. I mean, I got to live with what it's like to live with an active alcoholic for 12 years, and then when the drinking stopped, I got to see what was entailed in recovery, and how brutal it was, how hard it was to do it, and how much what it meant to really take moral inventory of yourself. And I went to AA meetings and all that stuff. So, I got drunk for the first time when I was probably 14 or something, and I started drinking in earnest when I was 16, which sounds kind of insane to me now, but that's just the way it worked there. They'll probably same for you, when you grow up someplace that's not in a big city where you're kept busy all the time by stuff, you kind of have to make your own fun. So that's just what we did, and but by the time I got going, I already knew what my deal might be, and I knew about genetics and the role that they play in alcoholism. And I've told my dad a million times, I just was invaluable. I don't know what my life would have been like if I hadn't had that education. It would have been a lot worse. I think it would have taken me a lot longer, because drinking was awesome. If you're an alcoholic, if you're disposed to that, drinking is amazing. When you start doing it, it's way better than it is for normal people. So, you tell someone that and they think, oh yeah, it is. I guess it's fun to get kind of buzzed, but sometimes you get a little too drunk, right? I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Right.
Was never too drunk once in my life, So yeah, I knew a lot about it by the time I started, and then it took me about, I guess I quit a month before my 20th birthday, which is pretty funny because I couldn't even drink legally, Yeah,
the first time I got sober was early like that. And then I went back out for a while in my mid-20s and wreaked some havoc in people's lives. But
yeah, so that was a huge, Missoula, where I grew up, is a very hard drinking town. Montana's hard drinking, but I've told a bunch of people this it's not really a statistic, it's just some dumb website or whatever, but I saw online some place had compiled the top 10 hardest drinking towns in the U.S., and Green Bay was number 1, which makes sense, and 4 of the top 10 were in Wisconsin, which also makes sense. But Missoula was on there. It was number 7, and the only thing surprising about that was that someone noticed, and put it on the list.
What's the criteria, I wonder, for hard drinking? Is it like percentage?
I think it may have been per capita. I don't know. It's interesting what takes hold socially and it is acceptable some places, and that's definitely the case with booze and Missoula, in particular. It's a very hard drinking town, and it results in a lot of, difficulty and pain for a lot of people, but I guess also fun probably. But I don't want to discount how fun it is. So, but yeah, it was super useful for me to go through all that stuff young,
right,
and have the perspective on it that I had when I started going, because it definitely got its claws. I mean, I knew. When I quit, I figured I was probably 75% sure I was an alcoholic, and now I'm like 95% sure,
right,
because I have perspective on it, and I've talked to people who aren't and are, and it's very clear to me which camp I belong in. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I see it in every other kind of behavior. I had a long conversation with a friend who he's a pretty successful musician and still, sits down at a meal and bottle of red, bottle of white for the table, and he's not afraid to indulge in. And we were talking about the fact that I don't one night late at a table in a restaurant, and I said, "Have you ever gotten out of bed because there were still drugs in the house?" And he said, "That sounds really weird." I was like, "Yeah, no, that's the sort of line for me. Like, were you just like, well, this is here, I got to use all of it,
I got to clean that up. Yeah.
Right. You don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's funny because the whole concept of not drinking everything that was there is like crazy. Was crazy to me. And I knew kids who would they'd buy a rack of beer and they would drink everybody would have 3 or 4 or 5 even, and there'd be like 4 left, and I was just like, yeah, give me those.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's
you can't not drink it. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. That for me, that first drink always went down like I was trying to put out a fire.
Yeah.
I don't remember a first beer ever, other than
no.
Yeah. Like that was not a thing you savored. That was step one.
No.
So.
Yeah. You got it down. Yeah. Totally. And yeah. I mean, I remember vividly one time when I had 2 beers because I had to drive. I actually just had 2. Otherwise I was at it until I had no more money, which was easy to do a lot of the time. You'd have enough for a pint of Jim Beam and that'd be about it.
Yeah.
Or I was out of money, or I didn't have time, or there was no more alcohol.
Right.
But otherwise there was no. I think I've had enough. Like I don't remember ever
having enough. Yeah. And I remember many times being mad about having only had 2 or 3 beers, like
yeah.
Like it's just enough to piss me off. But so my experience with getting sober young, and this may have been something that you experienced too, is that like I still had a lot of bad behavior to get out of my system, even as a person who wasn't drinking. Like sobriety, early sobriety for me was still a lot of obsessive behavior and a lot of kind of.
Sure.
I don't know if your time in Seattle was characterized by that, or if you had kind of gotten straight in the road before you got there. But
I mean it's well known that once you start using alcohol heavily, and I didn't drink every day or anything when I was a teenager because I couldn't,
right.
But I literally couldn't get a hold of the substance every day. But once a week or whatever, and when I did, it was no holds barred. So, but I think it's pretty well known that pretty well established that once you start really hitting drugs or alcohol to the point where it kind of informs your life more than it should, your ability to progress as a human being, emotionally and stuff ends, like it stops, so you get stalled out. And, for me, maybe it was only a few years, but I would say, yeah, I got stalled out at 16,
right.
And then I'm like 20 and I'm kind of 16, and, I think on the surface, like it helped me a lot that, my wife and I started dating when we were 16. So we were together starting about the same time that I started drinking, or a little before that. And she was with me the whole time, and we're still together, So there's this through line through that whole, through everything.
Man, I didn't know that.
Yeah. We've been together for, what is it now? I guess I just do the math, like 34 years.
Yeah.
34, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
And that helps a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
To have, but I mean, I think about the early days, especially in Seattle, when the band was like consuming, and maybe that had something to do with it. I think that it was more though, just the excitement of, not having to rent the Moose Lodge and go rent some shitty PA and set everything up yourself and be bouncers and take all the money. You could just go to the Central Tavern and play in front of 4 people, and to us, that was a huge win. They had mics, you didn't have to go rent mics.
Yeah.
So I think that was really more just the excitement of just being able to do our thing,
Mm-hmm.
and having time, because we'd all quit school to practice 3 or 4 times a week for 3 hours a shot or whatever.
Yeah.
That was like heaven to me, So we leaned into that pretty hard.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me as I was sort of doing some research for this conversation is that your musical career has been characterized by a lot of loss of really good friends. You lost Michael Dahlquist, and I want to talk about that a little bit, but also
Yep.
Jason Molina, and then just this week, David Berman.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes, because I have a similar history in a lot of ways. Maybe people who weren't quite so well known, though. I played with Vic Chestnut for a while. He committed suicide on Christmas Day a few years ago, and sometimes I think that part of the sort of, I don't know if I would use the word darkness, because it sounds like I'm trying to be Rimbaud, but like there's this kind of, as a recovering person, I'm still surrounded by people who are kind of in the thick of it, in the throes of it. And although, I mean, Michael was just snatched away from us by a sociopath.
Well, he was kind of a victim in an innocent bystander way of the same kind of syndrome, though. I think that affects any addict for sure. If you want to stop doing drugs or alcohol, you gotta you don't necessarily have to sublimate your ego, but it sure helps if you can do that and get outside of yourself and realize I'm part of the world and existence, and I don't really need to I need to figure out who I am and get rid of this thing. But kind of an important, I think, background part of that is, who I am and my idea about myself doesn't really matter that much. It's, I'm part of something a lot bigger. I'm not religious at all, but it's just a fact that we're part of a population,
Right.
however you want to cut it up. Right. It could be your band, or it could be your family, or it could be your town, or it could be your whatever, or it could be everybody on the whole fucking planet. But, you're part of a population, and you kind of are going to be better off if you're able to exist in that, as part of a whole, and that means you have to get out of your own head, and if you do that, I think it makes recovering from addiction easier, and it also removes kind of random violent bullshit from the equation, like what happened to Michael.
Right.
That was a pure act of ego on that woman's part. She just she ran into his car on purpose because she was trying to kill herself. So she runs into a car full of people. It ends up running into a couple cars full of people in the end because of the domino effect. But and ruins a bunch of people's lives, because it kills people and ruins a bunch of other people's lives because she just didn't want to be here anymore. So.
And she got like a broken ankle or something.
Yeah. She broke her ankle. Yeah, she went to jail for 4.5 years or some bullshit like that. But and I honestly think that, I mean, I don't want to second guess anyone, because in the aftermath of Michael dying, that's the most kind of desolate I've ever been through, and the level of kind of despair that you get to at the bottom of that is pretty fucking deep, So I remember specifically a moment where I realized, this is why people can't hack it anymore. This is why people do themselves in,
Right.
And I have some kind of hard stop in me against that, which is great. I learned that, I guess. But I also learned, oh, this is the bottom. This is what it feels like, you know. And I've known plenty of other people who've been through that shit in their life, and I've always tried to be sympathetic, but now I feel like I know, you know, what it feels like to be down there. So
the sadness becomes a thing that is no longer bearable, and you begin to think that nothing would be better. When I say nothing, I mean nothingness would be better than continuing to experience that sadness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You just want it to end, you know.
Right.
But I mean, even that though, and I didn't realize this until much later. I struggled with the whole thing for about a year and a half, and then like everybody else I know, I got on Lexapro. Like literally, I knew 10 people on Lexapro who were Michael's friends or whatever, or, you know, friends of John and Doug, the other guys who were killed. But so that helped, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, according to what I know about how it's supposed to work, maybe it's a placebo effect. I don't fucking know, but it seemed like it helped turn the lights back on at least.
Right.
And but I didn't really get over it till like 9 years later. I finally started going to therapy and stuff. And the thing that I realized was, you know, you become attached to these feelings of loss and grief, same as you become attached to your idea of who you are as a person or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what causes you to suffer. Like, if you don't have some preconception of how you should feel at any given moment, then you don't end up becoming sad that you're sad, you know, or despondent that you can't get out of the sadness. You just kind of live in it and are able to, if you can live in it and you're able to accept it at that moment, it's how you are, but not extrapolate from it, like I'm never going to get out of this or whatever, then you can process it, you know, and it becomes more like a wave that you're riding than something that's like totally burying you, you know. That's the best I can do to describe it. Like, but being able to let go of it like that, something terrible that happened to you, or being able to let go of your idea of who you should be and how disappointed you are in yourself that you didn't end up being that person or whatever,
right.
You know, it's just a relief, you know, and people get there regularly. They do it, you know,
right.
But sometimes people don't. And the people I've known who didn't do it, didn't make it,
right.
Inevitably, that's part of the problem, you know, that they just weren't quite able to turn the corner into it, not thinking about themselves quite as much, you know. It's like it's a syndrome that's, you know, it's a mental health thing, you know, and it's harmful. Yeah.
A friend of mine has a middle school age daughter who was being bullied this year, and she went through her first serious bout of depression. But then, like, they kind of pulled her out of the situation, put her in a different school, and she recovered, you know, and we were he and I were out on tour together with our band, and we were talking about it, and I said, you know, it seems like she'll now understand that, like, the difference between, like, yeah, she got caught in the rain and got wet and then got out of it again, as opposed to thinking for the rest of her life that she's just made of water.
yeah, totally. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, the cloud's not just following you around, raining on your ass. You
right.
know?
Yeah.
You just happen to be there and get drenched. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Through your course of your relationship with Jason Molina, were there times when you thought, "Oh man, this guy's not doing well"?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing was, we started touring. We toured with those guys, Magnolia Electric Company, in the relatively early days of the Pit, the Bottomless Pit. Our first record was out, so it wasn't early. But no, it wasn't quite out. But we'd recorded some of it. And anyway, we played on the East Coast with those guys, and they were just lovely people. I love those guys. Everybody in the band, just really lovely, awesome guys. And Molina was great. Obviously an oddball and stuff, but he was great. And then, you know, we did a bunch of tours together, and then we did this show in St. Louis where he was just falling down drunk. He's trying to tune his guitar, which is just hopeless. He's just turning the tuning pegs. Nothing good was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird thing to me was the band was so just like, yep, like not surprised. And after the show, I was like, wow, what happened there to Jason Groth, that guy who played guitar in that band. And he's like, yeah, I mean, that just happens, And I was like, shit. And after he died, we were talking about that. He's like, oh, he was on his best behavior around you guys, but that's who he was sometimes, and then in the aftermath of, that band sort of stopped playing together at a certain point, and Molina moved to England with his wife, and it was clear to me when we would correspond, which wasn't super frequent, but maybe once a month or something, pretty often, I guess, that he was being a fabulist in a way that was self-serving, and it was that he wasn't doing so hot,
Yeah. When you say he was being a fabulist,
well, it's a nice way of saying a liar, I guess.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean, a lot of times when I see people kind of getting to the end of their rope, a lot of times they'll make up these stories, and I don't even think that they're fully aware that they're not true, but as a way of getting themselves some hope. Like they'll have a casual conversation. They'll brush elbows with someone who's in a position to potentially help them, and then in their mind they build up this whole, like, this guy from this label he really likes my work, and he's gonna do this for me or that for me, and it's gonna.
Yeah.
Was it that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, or he would continually have stuff that was dogging him that was gonna like maybe kill him or whatever. That was like. He was convinced he had deep vein thrombosis at one point from flying back and forth to the U.S. and he was going to die. And, and you're like, dude, you're an alcoholic. Like, you're killing yourself with booze. And you're an addict and the addiction has you. So it's not like it's your fault or anything, but that's what's happening,
Did you guys ever have that conversation, though?
It's interesting. Because I find talking to addicts and drunks that it's really this kind of like balancing act thing where if they want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk with them as much as they want to talk. If they don't want to talk about it, then I try to just be encouraging and let them know that I love them. And if I do, or that I like them, or that they're worth something,
Right.
But try to just encourage them in the small things that are working okay for them,
Right.
And Molina quit a few times, so then I'd be like, well, it sounds good. You're living at your grandma's house. I know, it's probably not the most exciting thing in the world, but you're doing okay, and you just need to kind of ride this out and get used to this new suit of clothes you have on. And just kind of, you don't want to get too pep talky about it because someone like him would see through that, but you want to be encouraging.
Yeah. I actually kind of overstepped that line with another addict once who just gotten sober, and I tried to sort of pump them up a little bit, and they were just like, man, I don't need this fucking happy talk. Like,
well, a big part of it, honestly, is like, honestly, for me, all the people I've seen try to clean up, and some of them do, some of them don't, like, the more someone is the same basic person after they clean up, the better chance they have of sticking with it. Like if someone was a weirdo and socially awkward and stuff before, and then they're the same basic person after they quit, I usually look at that and I think, all right, good.
Right.
You're not like, oh my God, everything's awesome.
Right.
I stopped drinking. I feel so great. I'm running now. There's not this like, when there's that burst of joy afterwards, I always feel kind of bad for them. It's like, all right,
yeah,
good. You actually didn't fix all your problems, but you fixed one of them, and that's great.
Enjoy that while it lasts, because the real world's going to come rushing in soon enough. Yeah.
And we just, just put so much importance on being happy or feeling good, and that's not really what it's about. It's about I was just talking to a guy I know who got sober recently, and he was saying, he put it in a really great way. He'd had kind of a drift back into some bad thoughts and then moved out of it, but pretty quickly, he said. And he said he was talking to a shrink about it, and he told the shrink, yeah, I feel like the floor is a lot farther up and the ceiling's farther down, and that's okay.
Man, that's a great description.
Yeah, I like that. He doesn't have any expectation that he's going to be thrilled about his life all the time. It's just a matter of not, destroying himself, really.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Jason tried, and everybody who knew him and loved him tried so hard, to help him out. All the guys I know here who had played with him in Songs of High and stuff, they really tried everything to get him to kind of see what he had to do. And I think he kind of did see what he had to do. He just couldn't do it, He was just too, he was just in too deep. I mean, the guy drank himself to death at 38 or whatever. That's pretty hard to do.
Somewhere I read that there was only one number saved in his cell phone. It was his grandma's.
Yeah. I don't even think he had a phone. I think maybe it was just a piece of paper or something. But
oh man.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up in, he went all the way down, and
he was somewhere in Indianapolis.
Yeah, public housing. He lived in public housing in Indianapolis when he died, and the Magnolia guys told me, that they went in there afterwards, or someone did, and told them about it. Maybe he had all these like probiotics and stuff like that. Like he was just trying, kind of grasping at straws, trying to like keep himself going and try to find some kind of scrap of health in his life, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I've known other people who've done that and bounced off a guardrail,
right?
And he just didn't.
This whole thing with like trying to fix everything but the booze. I remember a friend describing trying to quit drinking as like, I feel like I'm firing my only friend.
Yeah, totally.
And
absolutely,
that's a terrible hole. Wasn't David Berman also living in Indiana? Was he in like Miller Beach or something?
Well, I guess so. Not too long before he ended up moving to Chicago. He was here, I think, at the end. Well, I know he was. I never met David until 2 months ago. I was with some people who were a long time, fellow travelers of his and stuff, and he was supposed to show up at this place, and then he kind of wasn't showing up, but we were hanging out, and then he showed up, and he's super weird and obviously not in good shape and stuff, but the people I was with were just lit up. They were so happy to see him, and these aren't like just fans or dum-dums or whatever. These are people who knew him real well and had been through everything with him, and it was clear how much they loved him, and and they got a little piece of him. He had all these little gifts for him and stuff and weird shit, and he was just chattering on him all the minute about stuff, and he was living here, and then I guess he was in New York when he died, supposedly, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's at this time, which is August 9th. Details are still kind of scarce on what happened, but my impression is that he was a guy who just really kind of struggled to have a normal life, to feel normal, and I think that's true. From what I know, from the people I know who knew him, I don't want to, speculate about anything really that much, but I think he was kind of like Jason in a way. It's funny to me to think that they might both be put out to be compared to the other person. At least, Molina might be. I don't know what you're talking about, but they were very attached to
who they, at least just talking about Jason, because I didn't know David. He was very attached to who he thought he was and what he thought his place in the world was as an artist, and Andy Cohen once said, it was this perfect line, it just summed him up. He's like, he said, yeah, Jason was like the most pretentious guy I ever met and the most guileless guy I ever met at the same time.
Yeah.
Like he had this whole like bag of like who he was and what he was all about that he carried along with him. But he was also, the way he expressed himself, artistically was very pure.
Right.
There was no, I don't want to say there's no artifice to it because some thought went into it and all that, but
right.
It didn't come off that way. It came off as being super direct in this kind of mystical way. And, but he was really into his own bag and who he thought he was. And honestly, I think in his case, at least, Jason's, the alcohol degraded his ability to be that guy,
Yeah.
He kind of was that guy for a long time. And then at a certain point he could do it anymore because, nobody can when you're doing that to yourself, you can't. And I don't want to speculate about David, but he was about to go on tour and stuff. And I wouldn't be shocked if he just couldn't get his mind around how he was going to,
show up
and be that person that he thought he should be, or that he wanted people to see him as, or whatever.
I mean, I think we adopt these personas as a form of adaptation. Like I remember there was a period of time when I started using again in my mid-20s where I was like, well, I'm a musician and a writer. Like this is what we do, This sort of way of trying to make sense out of a chaotic and disorderly world was this idea, like, like Kerouac or Hemingway or somebody that, or any of a million rock and roll drummers who just kept poking at their brains trying to get it to work right and putting on these things. And Molina had that, like, that singer songwriter poet maudlin thing. Pablo Neruda has a great poem about it, about declaring yourself a maudlin character as a way of finding a place in the world. And Neruda's poem is kind of rejecting it, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's a pretty great poem. One of my most recent conversations on the program was with Mike Dickinson, who's the head of Chicken Ranch Records, and recently, he was starting to work with this band Negro Terror, an all-black punk band out of Memphis, Tennessee, and the singer from that band was kind of a workaholic, didn't really take care of his health, and he got a staph infection on a wound in his back, which he couldn't see because it's on his back, and he just thought he'd pulled a muscle or something, and it killed him. And he just eventually went septic, and his body just wasn't able to cope with the inflammation and the infection, and he died in the hospital. And Mike was like, I don't even know why I run a label sometimes when I can't provide health care there's no way for me to, like, I can give you a little bit of money to make a record and I can put it out, but like I can't put you on a health plan, and I can't, like, he was really struggling with the feeling of helplessness of not being able to get and I think about all the people that we've lost: Dave Berman, Jason Molina, Vic Chestnut, Jeff Walls. This has been a series of musicians who've left the planet in the last few years, just out of pure like
Mark Linkhouse from the Sparkle Horse and whoever. There's tons of them.
Mark was at Vic Chestnut's funeral. And spoke very eloquently about his own struggles with depression and how much he loved Vic. And then I don't think it was even a full 2 years later before he committed suicide.
I thought a lot about I think it's tough you're talking about labels. I think it's tough for anybody who's like friends with or involved with folks who are struggling like that, because on one hand, you don't want to rein them in, and part of what makes people appealing and in another artistic sense can be the kind of wildness that comes along with them, but there's a point at which that doesn't age so great, and it kind of it can become kind of malignant and manifest itself in bad ways. And I mean, what do you do if you're in that situation?
Yeah.
You've been. It's not like you're propping this person up so that they will put out for you. It's you're helping this person navigate the world because they're troubled and they need help.
Right.
But there are also points where, I mean, I know from people I've talked to who've been in this situation, they're just like, I don't know what the hell to do. This guy or this gal is like out to lunch, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not their mom, how do I deal with this?
I don't ever want to be the downer in the room either. Like, I don't want to be the guy who says, hey, maybe that guy's got a drinking problem, because
no.
This is a sort of recurring theme on the show, is that, one of the great failures of the abstinence, the substance abstinence movement, is the failure to admit that there's a certain amount of productivity that comes with drugs. And, and that they can be, and the lack of like official or organized or like, sanctioned healthcare, that sometimes, smoking a quarter ounce of weed a week is a way of keeping, your anxiety at bay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's fun. I mean, at least for a while it's fun.
Right. And that's
drinking is amazing. And again, like, the more predisposed you are to alcoholism, the better it is, so, and it feels amazing when it feels good, and at a certain point it stops feeling good, and that's when things get real bad for people, but yeah, I don't know. I think that it's hard to say. There's kind of a chicken and the egg thing where it's like, I think that people who are troubled or have issues, they don't feel like part of the world and stuff. They gravitate towards rock and roll in particular because there's a home for you there no matter what.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. There's no litmus test. You just, if you want in, you just find your crowd and then you're there, So that's awesome, and it's great, and it saves people's lives. It really sets people up to live fulfilling existences and stuff. But
well, that validation is important too. Like the validation of like, okay, I'm this weirdo. Okay. Definitely like picked last for kickball in life, and then then one day you write a song or you play a part on a record, and someone says, "Man, I'm so glad you're here," and you think, "Oh, thank God, I finally found my spot."
Yeah, Yeah, totally. But I think it also it's not a totally benign thing that artistic impulse. It's sort of indulgent,
mm-hmm.
and it kind of encourages you to. It doesn't really encourage you to necessarily like grow as a human being. You know what I mean? Like, if you have this kind of, narrow focus or obsession is rewarded in rock and roll, because if you can really zone in on what you're doing and just kind of grind on it, you're just going to get better in the short term. But I do think it precludes a certain kind of like development as a person emotionally, a certain kind of maturity, and like I don't know about you, but I think fundamentally it's a young person's game.
Yeah.
And that's why, because that mindset goes of being a little bit into your own thinking and stuff to the exclusion of other things, that goes hand in hand with what you need to do to really be good at it. So when you get older, navigating that, wanting to still do it, but also be kind of better realized as an adult, that's pretty tricky to do, especially if you already had some kind of,
success.
If you've had success on a particular wavelength, being a particular kind of person,
sure,
and that informs your self mythology about yourself. It can get pretty sticky.
Like Van Halen were gods to me when I was 15. you know, like I couldn't believe that anything could be so great. And now, you know, David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen are kind of shambling around trying to have some sort of career still. And it's just like, man, how unfortunate for those dudes, you know, like, I mean, it's just like,
right.
I think that like Capitol used their labor for what it used it for. It rewarded them, you know, certainly not as much as it rewarded everybody who's sort of in charge of their careers. And then when it was done with them, it was kind of like, all right, guys, good luck, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how it works. And that's how it works at a kind of micro level for, you know, I mean, honestly, people like us, I mean, you know, the interest in what I do, musically is like, you know, not what it was when I was a kid. And, it's, but like I said, I'm fully aware that it's a young person's racket, you know, and I'm still doing it because I've never given a shit about, I feel very fortunate that I came up the way I did in Montana, in a place where you couldn't get anywhere. I mean, you just did it because you wanted to do it. And that's the same reason I do it now. So the fact that I sell fewer records now, even than I did before, and I never sold that many before, don't care. It's totally fine. As long as someone's willing to put it out, you know, or I can get it out. That's really all I care about. And I feel real lucky that that's the case. And what you said earlier about having some level of success, it can be dangerous in a way, I think, because you get attached to it, you know, and you get attached to your idea of it. It makes you think you are something.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to be Dr. Roxo when you're 27, but when you're 55, you know, the whole racket wears a little thin. I was telling somebody last night, though, I don't know what middle-aged dudes who don't have bands do to keep from being insanely lonely. Like, I mean, I have guys, you know, like I can go to the guitar player in my band and talk about stuff that's on my mind and stuff that's bothering me. And, you know, if you don't have like 12-step groups or a rock band, like I feel for you, you know, like what are you doing?
Yeah. The kind of, I remember reading a long time ago about, I'm not comparing myself to Ornette Coleman because that'd be silly, but, I read a long time ago, I love him, beyond reason, basically. And, I read a thing about him, like, basically he liked to practice. Didn't really give a shit about playing live. I mean, he played live and obviously all the time and put everything he had into it. But if the shows were few and far between, that was fine, but he had to practice all the time. Wanted to play with a group in a practice setting. I'm like, oh yeah, that's me, you know?
Yeah. I love to practice too.
I just want to play.
Yeah. It's this, like, I'm giving you some of my heart, you know, like, and I'm respecting the thing that you're doing and you're respecting the thing that I'm doing. And it feels like incredibly positive to practice. I don't understand people who don't like band practice, but I mean, I guess that's just, some people just don't want to spend the time, but
yeah. And people have different priorities for doing it, I guess, and stuff too. But that's really all it comes down to for me, is the sound of the group playing something together. And if that's rewarding, then it's just as rewarding in my basement as it is on stage, really, you know?
Yeah, I'm totally hooked on that moment where it gels and something transcendent happens. I just shoot that right into my veins, man. It's the best. And it's really sustaining. And if you can continue to sort of make that happen in your life, you know, that's why, you know, I'm 50 years old and I still do it, you know. It's I don't think I'll ever be able to give it up because I like the way it feels, you know. But you know, even at that, it's pretty, I guess that means it's pretty hedonistic, really, in a way, you know. It's a rush, you know, and I just like that rush, the way that feels, which is funny. I mean, my plan is to keep playing until someone's like, is he breathing? You know, like I just want to just keep playing music forever because that's what I do. What's your sort of maintenance? Like, how do you keep, like, what do you do? Yoga? Do you meditate? Do you hit meetings fairly regularly? Like, how are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah, I do yoga and I do meditate, and that's kind of what I do to try to keep my own keep myself from getting too wrapped up in my own shit, you know.
Yeah. Do you go to a studio to meditate? Do you do a thing at home? Like, what's your practice like?
No, I do it at home, and I feel guilty about not doing it with other people. But yoga, I go to yoga at a studio because I'm too lazy to really make myself do it. But
yeah, that's what I think when I think Tim Midyett. I think lazy.
But yeah, and you know, I don't go to meetings, and I never have, because I got it early enough that I didn't have to do it. It wasn't a value judgment or anything. I just stopped, you know. Yeah. It hadn't gotten its claws in me enough where I needed, but you know, I went to plenty of AA meetings before that, you know, between when alcoholism ended in my immediate vicinity at 12 years old. Over the next 3 or 4 years, I went to a lot. So maybe I front loaded all that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try to just stay. I mean, it's a simple thing, but it's very hard to do, to just, you know, stay in the moment. You know, just stay present. And I'm not saying I'm good at it or anything, but that's my goal. You know,
right?
That's the way I want to be. And when you can pull that off, it's good. You know, it's always good, even if you're in the middle of something kind of shitty, it's good.
Yeah. Well, the only way to get through pain is to get through it. Like, if you postpone it, it just only gets worse.
Yeah. Exactly. There's nothing to be benefited by. There's no benefit in trying to mask it or put it off or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I usually wind these interviews up with a series of 8 questions that I came up with, but this is going to be the first time I've done 9. Based on an interview I had last week with Bill Maloney from Vigilantes. Although I thought, here's one more question that might be useful. They're sort of based loosely on the Bernard Pivot questions that they end inside the actor's studio with, but they're different from those because everyone sort of got their preconceived notion of how they'd answer those. If you're ready, we can jump in.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first question is, what is the fondest memory that you have of a meal that you've had?
Well, the best meal I ever ate was at this place called Tevant in Paris, a very expensive restaurant that my wife and I went to. And I'm kind of off that level of dining lately because it seems kind of, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's beyond bourgeois, kind of wasteful maybe, but the place is fucking amazing, and we cried a few times eating there and stuff. But you know, that was just the 2 of us, and I really think about this one time when we were on tour in Italy. We ate a lot of great food. We were with our friends Ago and Giovanna from Uzeda, who were on tour with us, and we stopped at this place called, it was in Sant'Arcangelo de Romagna, and it was called, I can't remember, Trattoria something. But it was one of the best meals I ever ate in my life. It was me, Andy, Michael, my wife. Was Matt Cadane with us down that? I think he was. So it was a bunch of my, you know, closest friends and people I love most in the world. And we were just all marveling over how great this random place was. It was kind of like almost like a truck stop. And I remember that really vividly, you know, the whole thing. It had everything you'd want about a communal experience kind of bottled together. Yeah, that was awesome.
What did you have? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had a couple of different kinds of steak, and we had a whole bunch of different kinds of pasta. Chitarra, which is these very rough pasta. It's called chitarra because it looks like it's been cut with guitar strings, I guess, or something. Oh. But and it had this like perfectly made sauce. It just clung to the noodles and stuff. I remember a lot of those little details about it really vividly. And even Ago and Giovanna, who were, you know, they're from Sicily, and Sicily has amazing food. Giovanna was like tearing up how good it was, you know, and I was like, oh, we really are in the right place, you know, like I don't want to be anywhere other than here right now. Like, this is it, you know.
Every now and then I think about things like that. And I think people eat there every day. Like, there's someone eating there as we speak. It's just amazing. That's miraculous. One of the things I'm most grateful for in the world.
Yeah.
You've also
Trattoria del Passatore. That's what it was called.
Oh, man.
I just remembered, yeah.
Second question, and this is a question you can answer one of two ways, and I'll explain real quickly why that is. The question has been historically, what is the most frightened you've ever been? And that question for guys is pretty easy. You know, we can think of a half dozen times we're just scared shitless. But for women, sometimes that question conjures or triggers memories of violence against them that's been perpetrated by men. And so the alternate question is, tell me about a time you were braver than you ever thought you could be.
Yeah, I'll take the scared one. Or both of them if you want. But the most frightened I've ever been was I almost drowned once in a river in Montana. And I've told my daughter the story a bunch of times just to illustrate how easy it is to do something dumb and almost kill yourself. But there's this cliff on the Blackfoot River by Missoula that we called Heaven. It was probably a 30-foot drop or something. And you jump off it, and you got to jump out a little bit. You know, it's not horrible, but you can't just step off it. So you jump off it, and then you go down into this deep pool of water. And my friends were doing that, and then they were swimming across the river to the other side. And I'm not that strong of a swimmer now, but I definitely was not even less strong then, very inefficient. And I'd had a few times in my life where I'd had sort of not great experiences with water, but I was an idiot. So and maybe I'd had a few beers in me, I can't remember, but I jumped off this thing, went in the water, started swimming across the river, and I realized I'd left my shoes on. And if you ever try to swim with sneakers on, you know, it doesn't work out too well. And the river was pretty high, and the current was pretty fast. And I was trying to swim, you know, at a diagonal that would allow me to swim slightly upstream so I could get to my friends on the bank. And I was about halfway across the river, and I just realized I'm going to fucking die. Like, I'm going to drown out here. There's no way I'm going to make it. And I remember it super vividly, and I was just filled with this, like, burst of adrenaline. And I just kicked my feet as hard as I could, just put my face down in the water, and just ate up as much, you know, river as I could. And I finally, after doing that frantically for a little while, I felt my foot hit the bottom. And I clambered out of the river, and I walked over to my friends, and I tried to just be ice, you know. I tried to just be totally cool about it. And they didn't notice. I don't know if they were probably not paying attention, didn't realize I'd almost died or whatever. But I really almost bit it, you know. It was a very strong feeling of, I'm going down. This is how it's going to end for me. And that's the only time I've ever felt like that in my life.
You know, that you get that power surge of panic, but what comes in its wake is just exhaustion.
Oh, yeah. I was totally wasted. I don't even remember. Somehow we got back to the other side of the river because that's where our cars were parked. And I don't remember how that happened. I must have walked down and waded across in a shallower spot or something. Because there's no way I would have been able to do it again. you know?
Yeah.
It was brutal. It was very, very scary. Yeah, that's it for sure.
Yeah, I'm just sort of pondering like how many times that just being youthful and not thinking fully through the possible consequences of your actions has ended in a bunch of people having to put on a suit they wear once a year and go be really, really sad in a room somewhere.
Most of my friends have a moment because we spend a bunch of time on the river, and several of my friends could tell you a similar story about, oh yeah, that one time I was on my inner tube and I hit a log in the water and it poked it and it blew up, and then I was in the river and I got caught behind that one rock and that one bend that has an eddy behind it, and I was underwater and I couldn't get out, you know, like I've heard that story from one friend of mine, or various people. Our raft got a hole in it, and I fell out, and I was in the middle of the river. So yeah, that every year someone dies in Missoula.
Yeah.
And we were in it this summer, but it was really low, and we took great caution, and everything worked out just fine.
What river is that?
That's the Blackfoot.
Famous trout fishing river.
Yeah, it is, and it feeds into the Clark Fork, which is the river that goes right through Missoula, directly through Missoula.
Do you fish?
No. I would love to fly fish. My uncle's kind of a fly fisherman, or has been, and in the back of my mind, I'm sort of saving that for when I'm like 75 years old, if I make it that far.
Yeah.
I'll go do some bad fly fishing in Montana at that age, maybe, if I can pull it off.
Yeah. Well, my dad's he's in that age range, and he's certainly strong enough to get into the water and fish, but he never really embraced the whole fly fishing thing like I did. I'm insane with it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. In fact, if you ever want to get a head start, we should get together, because warm water fly fishing is you catch a lot more fish, because you're not dealing with incredibly finicky trout and moving water and drifts and all the hard stuff. You're just like throwing poppers for brim and bluegill, and that's a lot of fun and gets you can build your confidence up. But the next question is, what is the thing in your life that you've lost that you regret losing the most?
Oh, like an item?
I mean, it could be anything. When I originally came up with the question, it was meant to be an item. I don't think anybody has answered it as an item. Everyone has been like, my sense of wonder is a strongly a recurring answer that I never anticipated.
I find I still have that for some reason. Like regularly, if it's night and I'm able to look at the sky and there's not too much light pollution and stuff, it always kind of blows my mind still. But I mean, including people. I mean, losing Michael was easily, like number one, way up at the top, and everything else is like distant behind that. That's human beings, which are, I mean, unless you're a sociopath, they're going to be more highly valued than things, obviously.
Right.
So let me try to think of something materialistic.
I think that if you haven't seen Couldn't You Wait, and you don't know some of the history around Michael, it might be tempting to underestimate like the place he took in so many people's lives as being this extraordinarily spontaneous. You talk about someone with a sense of wonder, like that guy just walked through life. Like, have you seen that cartoon with the bunny? Like, man, what a beautiful day! Look at that fucking sky. Look at those fucking flowers. Like, it's so great to be. It's so fucking great to be alive. Like, the times when I was around Michael, it just felt like, this guy was just drinking as deeply from the well of life as he could, and to have him snatched away is just brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it was the worst, but you can't say he didn't get the most out of the time that he had, because he did, and he did genuinely love life. He wasn't, without his maudlin qualities from time to time, but in general, he was just someone who loved being alive, loved people, just loved doing stuff, and he also rubbed off considerably on the rest of us, Right. I was kind of a wolf child, having grown up in Montana and, been, I wouldn't say I was a misfit. I had a lot of friends and stuff, but, there's just kind of a limit to the amount of, there's kind of a limited range of social situations you're going to be in, in a little college town in Western Montana.
Yeah.
Before the internet and stuff, it's isolated. And so moving to Seattle, we all felt, and Joel was even more like that. And Andy was, sort of like that. and we kind of learned from him, I think, how to like navigate in the world. There's one of the Bottomless Pit songs where I talk about basically that he kind of helped make me a person, you know.
Right.
And that's a little bit hyperbolic, but not too much. So
no, I arrived in Athens with a very narrow set of concepts about how a man could be in the world, having like spent a lot of my formative years in South Georgia. You're, as a man, you got two jobs: protection and providence of a family, you know, a heterosexual family, and and like you've got a pretty strict, narrow range of emotions you're allowed to display. Anger is okay, and you can laugh as long as it's not too hard at yourself, and and you can be sad as long as it's about soldiers who've died, or you know, like it was a fairly limited emotional range that you were allowed. I moved to Athens, man, which was like at the time experienced this kind of artistic explosion, and you know, that was at the height of REM's, well, the beginning of REM's ascendance into national prominence, and this sort of, there were all these artists and musicians and creative people, you know, making art, making food, making friends, like, and I was this like angry little turnip of a human being, you know, who really had to be sort of brought into the real world by my peers, and I feel like Michael is that kind of guy, like.
Yeah, and honestly, like the rest of the whole thing in Seattle was pretty gross, you know, like people I think tend to think of that time in the early 90s in Seattle about being all about sub pop and stuff, and that was certainly a big deal there, but there was also this huge overlay of just like shitty rock music that was being promulgated for the sole purpose of bands like getting famous and like all the shit that we hated, right? So you know, it would have been very easy to have not met him and to have had a much worse time of it in that town than we ended up having, you know. But he was just invaluable, you know, as a human being to have around and be in your circle and in your corner and, you know, be on the same team as him. It was great. So,
let me ask you this.
So, yeah.
When people say, I don't understand why Silkworm didn't make it, do you ever bristle at that question?
No, because I understand why we didn't make it. It's no mystery to me.
Yeah, I understand why 5/8 didn't make it in commercial terms, because we were just absolutely ungovernable people. But we were surrounded by people who were becoming hugely successful, at least, you know, from the outside, and some of whom did really well financially too. But like, I don't have any regrets about what happened with 5/8.
No,
you know? Like,
no. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, none of us are on reality TV shows burning credibility for fuel right now. You know, like none of us are at celebrity rehab or anything dumb like that. You know.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, who cares? You know, it's like, I guess I try not to be dismissive about it to people who, because, you know, like that was expressed in that movie that was made about us, the Couldn't You Wait movie, by a couple people, like a sense of almost like indignance, is that a word?
Yeah, no, exactly.
They thought it was, you know, an insult to us or whatever. But, you know, the reality was, I knew at the time the music was weird, and like that's been borne out by time. Like I go back and listen, as I've had to, or gotten to, really felt privileged to do it, listen to some of our older records have gotten reissued. They're fucking odd, you know. I love them, and I'm shocked at how great they are in some ways, but they're weird records, you know, and there's just, within our limited audience, there's kind of unlimited appeal of that music, you know.
Right.
But it was a limited audience, and it was very kind of cryptic and odd music, and the way we did it was odd. So the one thing that but yeah, I mean, I guess to your point, the one thing I think is like, what difference does it make? You know, we were never trying to do. I just wanted the records to come out and be able to play shows.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't want to be Blink-182, you know.
No, and if we'd wanted to do that, we would have done things differently, and we had we had opportunities to do things differently, with this or that record label. There was one guy who, a guy who's still a good friend of mine, was an A&R guy there, and he's a lovely dude, and we're friends to this day and stuff. But his boss wanted us to record with like the guy who made the Hooters record or whatever, and we were just kind of like, that was a turning point for us, where we're like, all right, tapping out,
Yeah.
Let's see if we can be a Matador or something. That's our ideal thing to do. So, but even then, it was like we didn't play ball really. Like the second record we made for Matador is just this great record, I think, the record developer, but it's a bummer, and it's a very odd, weird, lonely kind of record.
Yeah.
And that's what we gave them, and there were 4 or 5 songs that could have been on that record that were sort of catchy and fast, and we're like, nah, they don't really fit in,
Yeah.
And I think we knew when we took them off, we were kind of signing our death warrant. Not that we wouldn't have got dropped anyway, but it just didn't feel like the right thing to do, so we didn't do it,
Yeah.
So I think the whole concept of, I understand it from a fan's point of view. Like, why don't more people like this if I like it so much?
Right.
But as someone who's been listening to music for fucking 40 years actively, I know that if I really love something, unless it was made before 1978, the chances of it having a wide audience are extraordinarily small.
Yeah.
And he calls it the kiss of death. He's like, if I like something enough, it's never gonna make it.
I mean, it doesn't minimize I think that people's idea that you didn't get to play for millions of people somehow invalidates that meal you had at the restaurant in Italy. Like, I still got to do all those things, and I didn't have to do it under the like insanely proprietary gaze of some tour manager who was making 6 figures a year to make sure I didn't OD or something. Like, I got to do stuff and experience things, and I don't have really any complaints about the level of success that 5/8 has experienced, so.
No, zero. Don't care, at all.
Yeah.
Which is great. I'm grateful for that perspective, to have come up with that perspective and to have kept it the whole time, because otherwise would have stopped a long time ago.
Tell me about a time you received an act of kindness from a stranger.
Oh, from a stranger. Gosh. Okay, let me think here. What the hell? Surely someone has done something nice for me at some point in my life who I didn't know.
Whenever I ask this question, I think about all the hundreds of thousands of couches I've slept on and floors and times people help my band out. But that's like a really good baseline for me to remember, to be grateful for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's something that when you're touring and stuff, you kind of almost take it for granted because you're just scrambling,
Yep.
And you don't have a lot of perspective on life when you're doing stuff like that. You're just trying to stay warm and get a decent night's sleep. On that front, I do remember a time we were on one of our barnstorming kind of shitty tours, and we burned up our brakes in Denver in the mountains in Colorado on this 77 Suburban we were touring in, and we had to abandon it in Denver to get worked on. And then we rented a minivan and scrambled to try to make the show. We had Albuquerque, and we didn't make it. And we stayed at the promoter's house, and they were smoking pot and listening to the Jerky Boys CD all night. It was terrible. And but then our next show was in Lubbock, Texas. So we go to Lubbock, and this woman, Heather Goff, who I have no idea where she is or what she's doing now, but she was the person who set up the show at this place, Einstein's. It was a laundromat, as I recall. And again, I don't usually remember anything about shows, but I remember that show was super fun, and it was great. We sold a bunch of shit, and we had a couple of days off, and we had to go back and return this minivan from Lubbock to Denver. And so she took care of everybody. We stayed with her and her friends, and Michael and I drove overnight from Lubbock to Denver in this minivan, which I remember very vividly. Got our newly repaired Suburban, drove back to Lubbock, and still had like another day to kill there, half a day. But those folks were just so cool and good to us. It had no reason to be, really. Opened up their homes, and I'm still good friends with some people who did that kind of thing for us. Unfortunately, not her, but other people I can think of for sure. We're close friends to this day.
I was talking to this band, Friendship Commanders, from Nashville a few weeks ago, and the drummer is a guy who also does a ton of session work and has traveled with both country and rock bands. And he said traveling with country bands through Texas is a nightmare, but traveling with rock bands through Texas is a dream. And my experience is parallel to that. Like, I still remember, I'm still friends with promoters from Fort Worth and Dallas, and stayed in houses that they had just for bands to stay in, and ate amazing meals around big tables with a bunch of friendly people. And it's just like this seldom times when I'm happier than when just a bunch of people having a good meal. Not even, doesn't have to be a great meal, but just the conviviality of being together and having a moment like that, and will always be really precious to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you say strangers, it's like kind of the twist on that is that sometimes then those people end up being your friends,
Sure.
And I remember in the wake of Michael dying, like Jason Molina was super nice to us. He gave us this CD shortly after it happened, or left it for us at the studio, because Magnolia was it's just funny how shit works. Like, we were at Electrical recording when we got word that Jason had died. But before that, Jason and Magnolia were in the studio recording when Michael died. So, it's kind of fucked up. But he was, obviously Steve was, like, destroyed because he was as close to Michael as we all were. And Jason picked up on that, and he was really affected by it. And he wrote a song. He said, I wrote this song for Michael or whatever. But Andy and I got the CD, and we liked his music a lot and stuff. And we played it, and it was just some song about like a rabbit or something. It's like, had nothing to do with anything that happened, but it was nice, Mm-hmm. But then he was like, "You guys should come play with us," blah blah blah. And we just cherry picked these dates on the tour because we couldn't. I was not able to get away to tour at that point in my life, and because of work and stuff. And we cherry picked all the best dates, and they just rolled with it, and they paid us way too much, And I don't think of that being a thing from strangers, because I know and love all those guys and everything. But thinking back on it, there was zero reason for them to do that, you know. And the fact that they did it was it really helped us out a lot,
to just cope
emotionally. Yeah, to be able to get out and do that, do our thing. Yeah, totally.
What's your favorite place to gig?
I would say a good show in Chicago is great. Historically, my favorite clubs have been, I love Lounge Acts here and Hideout here, but I also really love Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco. Yeah. That's an awesome place. And I was relieved when the Pit, the last tour we ever did, whenever that was, 2012 or whatever, we played there, and we hadn't played there in forever, and it was the same. Like, it was literally the same vibe, totally welcoming, friendly, and great, and I loved it there.
When you consider everything that's happening in San Francisco and how much it's changed, the whole Heraclitus thing, you can't step in the same river twice. To have a rock club that still feels the same as it did would be, that's like preserved in amber. It's a perfect thing.
Yeah, it was remarkable. It was really remarkable, and our interactions with everybody who came to the show were really great, and I remember that pretty vividly. The best time I've ever had on tour was in Japan, probably, or Italy. We toured Italy a couple times, and that was great. And then when we toured Japan, just the guy who set that up there, my friend Iseki, who again now he's my friend. At the time, I didn't know him at all, but it was just wonderful. Like the whole thing. It was only 4 shows, but all the shows were great, and they treated us just amazingly well, and it's a beautiful time. Yeah, super good.
Yeah, Japanese rockers are the best. I've been in a Japanese rock band for the last year, and I just this band's called Pinky Doodle Poodle. They just had to go back to Japan because their visa expired, and it's just the best, man. They rock harder than anybody I've ever played with, and I don't.
Yeah.
If you had to ask me, like, what do you mean rock harder? How do you explain that? I'm like, I can't really qualify it, or at least quantify it in any real terms, but like, man, they just give 100% every time they play, and they just mean every bit of it so much. There's no ironic distance. There's no superiority to the work. Like, no one's thinking, I'm above this gig.
Exactly. No, there's no irony over there. Like, and it's not because they don't get it, which is funny to me. They totally get it. At least the people I've talked to, they understand why irony is funny. And I was talking to my friend Iseki on that tour that we did, because this is another thing where I just thought this is advanced, because he had this T-shirt on for this band, and they were called the Pleasure Fuckers. So across the top it said Pleasure Fuckers, and huge letters. I can't remember what the cartoon was, probably something that's seen. And we were going to get on the Shinkansen to go from Tokyo to Osaka. And I was like, you can wear that shirt on the train, It says Pleasure Fuckers on it, man. And he was like, yeah, it's fine. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. I said, people won't be offended by your shirt. It says fucker on it. And he's like, no. And I was like, well, people don't know what it means. And he's like, no, they know what it means. Everyone will know what it means. And I was like, what do you call someone if you want to be mean to them? If it doesn't have a sting, or whatever. And he's like, And I was like, asshole, prick. Went down the line, and he's like, no, none of that would matter. Even if you translated it, it wouldn't have any effect. And then he had one word, and I forget what it was, but it was something that meant like, maybe, I don't know. It was something that meant you were lazy and had no ambition.
Oh, no, that's different. Baka just means jerk.
Yeah, maybe that would work. Yeah.
They got a one all-purpose, like, container term for, like, difficult person. But I think it, like, being difficult in Japan is kind of considered maybe dishonorable or something. Like,
yes, I think that's true. And I think that the kind of level of control people have in polite society there, maybe that's why some of the music is so unhinged, is because there's just a strong reaction to that going the other direction, because we found that too. We played with a couple of bands there that were just like great. Well, we played with Melt Banana, who were the full band at that time, and they were insane, of course. Well, I'd seen them before. We played with a couple other bands, this band called Meat Eaters that was amazing, and a band called Detroit 7. We played with the Seki's band too, but it was just like nuts.
Yeah. You ever see Teen Generate?
Yes.
Amazing
same kind
band.
of thing, or Guitar Wolf,
Oh yeah.
And certainly, all the noise stuff that comes out of there is like, maybe it could only have come out of there, in a weird way. Maybe Marisbao only comes out of someplace like Japan that's fairly buttoned up. Otherwise, yeah.
So visa and income considerations aside, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
I love Japan. I would, if I set aside any family considerations or anything like that, I would want to spend some time there.
Yeah.
Because we just went on vacation there for a couple of weeks this summer. It was great. and one of my family, my wife and my daughter, had been there. I wanted them to see it, and I think it's a great place. It's a very interesting society for an American, and there's a kind of earnestness, kind of in general, to the culture there that I find just kind of neat. I'm attracted to that. Yeah, I love it there. I think it's great.
Man,
I think it's a great place.
There's a sort of culture of like sarcasm and casual insult that kind of permeates American rock musicians, and there's such a like low tolerance for it. And touring with this Japanese rock band, I can't think of a single time anyone ever said anything insulting or demeaning or in any way like sarcastic. Like, it's maybe I'm just too much of a goddamn candy ass to like mix with regular society. But when I'm touring with people who are kind to me all the time, man, it makes life so much easier.
Yeah, it's great. And I've been playing shows with my friends in this band Sun, and I've been playing bass with them. It's been great. And what I have found interesting about it is how enthusiastic everybody is about what's going on, and how there's kind of a lack of that. I mean, people, they're in jokes in the band about what's going on, and we're just going to go out there and play one note for a bunch of stoned people anyway, or whatever, stuff like that. But at the root, everybody really appreciates what's being generated, the experience that's being created for people. And I find that with the friends I have who are more, who are jaded and stuff, that I talk about rock music with, which is a lot of them, it's almost a meta commentary on ourselves now, like to be running this or that thing down. It's almost like you're saying, I'm lame for even talking about this, but, blah, 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 blah. And there are a lot of callbacks to stuff that we talked about, in the 90s or whatever.
Right.
So, but yeah, just pure unvarnished, sarcasm and insult culture and stuff. I mean, that kind of peaked for me with like Forced Exposure, and Gerard and Steve were like the kings of that, kind of thing. Gerard Kozlov and Steve Albini in the 80s, with Conflict and Forced Exposure and stuff. They were the best ever at it, and I still remember a lot of the funny shit that they said. But at the time, it seemed like that was out of a kind of rabid enthusiasm for something, right? So there'd be a reaction against things that they thought were not worthy of people spending their time doing.
Right.
It wasn't. There was nothing kind of just casual about it. It was pretty gripped.
Right.
And maybe that's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. So, do you have an ideal or perfect instrument? And if you do you own it already?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I think I kind of do. My friend Kevin Burkett makes these aluminum guitars at an electrical guitar company in where the shit is he now? I think
Birmingham.
He's in Mississippi now.
No, he's in Birmingham.
Oh, he's
Alabama.
in Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah, and so Kevin is. I was around when he decided to initially do that, which he started in on when he first saw Valinos and Travis Beans at Electrical Audio, which is part of the reason he's called his concern Electrical Guitar Company, I think. But anyway, the first baritone guitar that Kevin ever made was a prototype that he made after talking to me, and I told him, well, I'm pretty happy with my Travis Bean, but here's what I would do if I were you, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And he made it. It's a Travis Bean Standard.
Yeah.
That I had modified so that I could tune it down to A, and it was a little wobbly because it's pretty short scale length for that kind of thing, but it worked well enough that I played it for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But he made this guitar and he sent it to me to try out, and I couldn't believe how awesome it was. And told him, I'm not going to send you this guitar back. I'm just going to send you my Travis Bean as a trade. And that's what I did. I just sent him the Bean. I'm like, I'm done with it. I love this guitar, but I don't need it now. And that guitar is like too heavy, and it has neck dive, and it's crude compared to what he does now.
Right.
But it's really a wonderful instrument. I'm not playing it at the moment, but between that, another guitar that he made for me, and a couple of hollow body baritone 12-string electrics that I had put together by a guy here in town named Jeff Benji, I'm kind of set. I've got what I need to do my thing. Yeah. And then I have a Travis Bean wedge bass that's like the bass. That's
right.
That's all. That's almost all I need to play bass. Yeah.
So this is the new question that came from my conversation with Bill Maloney last week, where we both talked about the myriad number of instruments that we've sold. But is there an instrument that you sold that you wish you could have back?
I would think there would be. One time I had a 1955 Les Paul Jr. that played really great. It was a Players one that had been refretted and stuff. And I got rid of it because it didn't sound quite the way I wanted it to sound. And I don't really play regular guitar anyway, but I kind of wish I'd hung on to it because it was a great guitar in a lot of ways. And however I ended up trading it, I ended up getting stuff that I still use. But there's nothing that I really regret super bad. Like I traded that Travis Bean to Kevin for this electrical prototype, and those guitars are probably worth $6,000 now or something. So he made out fine. But I don't actually regret it. I kind of have everything I need to do what I do. So I don't find myself pining over stuff I've gotten rid of, which is nice.
Yeah. So last question. If you could imagine a taxi that's not confined by time or space, as we understand it, you can go anywhere at any time, and you got in this taxi and you said to the driver, hey man, take me home. Where would that taxi take you?
No place. I think I'd be right here. Yeah, because I don't feel like Missoula, Montana is my hometown, but when I go back there, it's like revisiting something. I don't feel like it's really where I'm from, but it's not where I am.
Right.
I really feel like, I guess I'm pretty lucky, probably, because I feel like where I am right now, geographically and in terms of my family and our living situation, is like, pretty much bullseye.
Yeah, my answer to that question is right where my family is. Like that's all that really matters.
Yeah. It would absolutely, and I thought we have a lot of house, and it's great, and I can play music here and make records in the basement and stuff, and it's awesome. But if we had to move or something, we'd be fine. As long as I'm with them, it's gonna be good.
I do have one more question. It is something I've been meaning to ask you and a half dozen other people from Chicago, but sure. You and Weissenberger and a couple other people have said this thing, and I don't understand it. They say, man, I have an amazing time every time I go to Milwaukee. I'm like, yeah, I love that town. I could never live there. And and the first time somebody said it, I was like, yeah, I guess, I understand. Like you live in Chicago, and it's kind of the in many ways the sort of muscular center of the country. Like,
yeah.
But then like 5 other people said it, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like,
oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And I mean, why not Milwaukee?
Well, Milwaukee's an interesting place because it's much larger than people think it is. I think it's bigger than Minneapolis. And the metro area is pretty enormous. And it's got a lot going for it. It's changed a lot just even over the last 7 years since I actually own half of a internet consulting company with my friend Rob Saraki, who I know from playing music and stuff. He's in a band called Dis. And anyway, we own this company, and Rob lives in Milwaukee, and our staff's in Milwaukee, and our offices are in Milwaukee. So I'm up there like once a week or so. But I think it's a great town. I think it's just because, like you said earlier, like there are only a handful of real cities in the U.S. And I feel pretty okay saying that, even though it's kind of mean, maybe, because sometimes towns think they're cities.
Yeah.
But New York is a city, straight up. LA is a city. Chicago is a city. And and those are the kind of the big three. I mean, Houston's a city, I suppose, but it's also sprawling and weird in ways that, urban density sort of helps define an urban environment, and Chicago has that,
Right.
So I think that there's just a sense like, if you live here or you live in New York, you live in LA, like, if you live in LA, Santa Barbara is something totally different or whatever. Or like, if you live in New York, Hoboken's not New York, it's different. And Milwaukee is a fine place, but it just ain't Chicago,
Right.
And I know that makes me sound like a snob, but I love it here. I think it's for all its faults, and I could list out a lot of problems of this fucking city, but I felt more at home here than any place I've ever lived, other than the Missoula, which I'm attached to because I grew up there.
Right. See, for me, like, as someone who is not super comfortable living in an urban environment as much as I'd like to be, because I love all the urban things. I like being able to, like,
Sure.
You know what? I want dim sum. I don't care that it's 3 a.m. There's a place on Mott Street that's serving dim sum right now.
Yeah,
and I love
totally.
that.
Yeah.
But I get wicked anxiety from being surrounded by people all the time.
Yeah.
And not seeing green stuff. Like, I live in Bishop, Georgia, and it's almost too busy here for me. So when I hear someone say, I love Milwaukee, but I could never live there, there's like a part of my brain that's like, what is it, not fucked up enough for you? Like, it's like did you not get your suffering merit badge? Like that,
Yeah.
But I think that there's a certain urban life thing where you're like, all right, I've moved to one of the great cities in the country and flourished and thrived, and that's a badge of honor in a way.
Kind of. Yeah.
Well, but also there's a certain amount of it also helps that we're white men in a time in a country.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh my God, 100. And there's no better example of that privilege than Chicago. A city that's like, I mean, this is a whole other thing, but it's literally designed to be racist. Like, the way the highway cuts through the city is intentionally done as a barrier between the south side of the city and south and west sides of the city and the rest of town. Like, it's designed that way. Like, it's the segregation of the city is built into the actual streets.
I mean, there's a part of me now that's suppressing this reflex to be like, what? Chicago's not a southern city. How could there be racism? Because as a southerner,
Well, what's interesting about that, I think there's a knee-jerk tendency, and I have friends who will remain nameless who indulge in it, that the South is racist and blah, blah, blah. But the thing I've noticed about the South, being in Memphis or Atlanta or wherever is North Carolina, there's a very visible African-American middle class and upper middle class in urban areas in the South that isn't readily apparent at all in a place like Chicago.
Or Boston.
Despite the fact that we have, or certainly Boston.
Yeah.
But despite the fact that we have a pretty large African-American population up here, there's not that. Yeah. I know people who are Black and they're upper middle class and live very comfortable lives, but there's not a cultural kind of critical mass of people like that who exist in the city as a visible part of the culture.
Yeah.
And you definitely see that in Memphis or Atlanta's a perfect example of it. So it's funny to think that, like, oh yeah, I guess if you just want to be stuck in the Civil War, there were slaves down there and there weren't slaves up here technically, but if you're going to look at the world since then, there's a lot to answer for in a place like this. And honestly, we live a life of extreme privilege here. I could say, well, I did this and I did that, and that's how I ended up living in this neighborhood that's basically like Canada,
right.
Like with a huge backyard, and like I can just go like lie in the hammock right now if I wanted to or whatever, and definitely not get shot,
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, if I wasn't white and able-bodied and straight and all the inherent advantages I have in this town, I wouldn't. Chances are pretty good that I wouldn't have ended up where I ended up. So,
holy shit!
With all those caveats in mind, I'm happy to be here.
I just had this huge realization that part of my anxiety about urban living is that I'm able-bodied for the most part, but I've had periods of profound depression in my life where if there hadn't been this sort of rural safety net, this quality of like, I don't know what it is about rural communities, but there tends to be a little bit less of a competitive environment and more of a like, we're kind of all in this together. People let me crash on couches and stuff when I was falling apart and not able to like support myself. There's been a safety net. And I remember a day when I was living in Rogers Park and I walked out the front door and it was just after the first snow and there were some tents in Toohey Park, which is right across from my front door. And I thought, man, there's people sleeping in those fucking tents and it's 17 degrees out here. And there was a part of me that thought, what is standing between me and that? And it wasn't enough for me to not get super anxious about it. And that was why urban life is super hard for me, because there's a part of me that's always like seeing homeless people under bridges in parks thinking, man, I'm like one slip into darkness away from like that. And so it's kind of why I like to have a lot of trees around me and family and that kind of thing. But
totally. And also just the demands on a person in like we were just in our hometown of Missoula for 10 days, and the demands on a person in a place like that just aren't the same, and just in terms of your time and stuff, like you don't have to drive half an hour to get to your doctor's office.
Right.
Like I have to drive half an hour to go to see my main doctor or whatever. So, like I said, man, given everything that we've managed to build up and have been fortunate enough to have come our way here, it's awesome. I love it here.
Yeah.
But, just to rope Milwaukee back into it, like Milwaukee has a lot of the things that are cool about being down here, but it's a much more kind of innately livable place for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's still deeply segregated,
Yeah.
And the quality of life in the poorer parts of Milwaukee is obviously a fuck of a lot worse than it is in Bayview or whatever.
Right.
But if you can manage to live in Bayview, it's not that expensive and it's lovely. You're right by the lake and stuff, and it's really great. So,
right. One of the great things about Athens, Georgia, is that you can work a full-time job and have a kid and still get to band practice because it never takes longer than 50 minutes to get anywhere.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, driving from my mom's house in Missoula up on the hill to the center of town is like 12 minutes,
Right.
And that's far for that.
Yeah. When I lived in Chicago, though, I would try to drive from 7327 Paulina, where I lived, to my work, which is right out by Electrical Audio Studios, and it was a 45-minute drive, and it was less than 7 miles. I mean, I could have run it in that time, But it was fucking freezing.
That's funny. We our first house was 6100 block of Paulina.
Oh no shit.
So not too far away from there.
Yeah.
kind of where Edgewater turns into Rogers Park almost.
Yeah. I loved that neighborhood. It had a little edge to it, which made me really, like, talking about sort of struggling with anxiety. That was something that kind of kept coming up. Like having to remember to lock my doors and on my car and stuff.
Oh yeah. You definitely want to do that.
It was just a change from growing up or living I'd lived in Athens at that point for 15 or so years, and it was just a different lifestyle. Well, man, I really appreciate you doing this. We put some time on the meter here. It's a nice long conversation.
No problem.
I hope I get to see you next time I'm in Chicago.
Well, let me know, and I'll come down and see you guys.
Yeah,
if I'm in town, which I probably will be.
Yeah, well, if not, we'll hit Milwaukee the next day. So we'll catch you there too.
Yeah, awesome, man.
Well, man, thanks for your time. It was really good speaking to you, and I hope we get to hang out soon.
Absolutely, me too. Great chatting with you, Patrick.
All right, bye, Tim.
All right, that's my interview with Tim Midyett from Silkworm, Bottomless Pit, and Mint Mile. Man, he's a great guy. Man, somebody who's always seemed to have his life pretty together. Thanks for listening. Just want to remind everybody, if you're having dark thoughts, if you're struggling with thoughts of self-harm, if you need somebody to talk to, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. It's 24/7. It's free. It's confidential. It's staffed with trained volunteers to help you through your crisis. 1-800-273-8255. If you're a trans person who's struggling with anxiety, depression, dysphoria, you need a peer to talk to, the Trans Lifeline's peer support line is 1-877-565-8860. That's 1-877-565-8860. Thanks to everybody who's contacted the show. If you want to email us, it's crashandride@protonmail.com. Our Patreon site is www.patreon.com/crashandride. Thanks to the new Patreon supporters, we picked up a couple of new sponsors this week. That's listeners like you who pledged $5 or $10 a month to help support the program. Thanks to Heil Microphones for the great deal on these 2 microphones I got that are just making this whole thing sound so much better. In the meantime, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, ask for help if you need it, go see live music, support your favorite band, and remember, loud guitars save lives.